All right, no problem. So basically, we're going to do a rational proof of God, not using any scripture to
Yeah, but
start.
wait, hold on. We're talking about Islam, right? Not just God, Islam.
No, just God. But this God that we rationally prove is what we as Muslims worship. Because we're not
Wait,
worshiping anything special. We're worshiping the logical necessity, the uncaused first cause.
yeah, but wait, hold on, just 1 second. There's more to it than that, right? You might be logically worshiping something that makes sense logically, but there's a difference between that and saying, that Prophet Muhammad is a prophet, and the Quran is the word of this God, etc. There's a distinction there.
But we can establish all the attributes of the deity that we're worshiping. And so what we're doing, again, we're starting. So anytime somebody asks me to prove Islam, the first thing you have to do is prove God.
Okay, fine.
Because if
But
there is no God,
I hope we get to the Islam part later. But okay.
yeah, we will, don't worry.
All
It's
right.
all tied together.
All right.
So the logical proof of God is where we're going to start. If everybody is okay with that. And so basically, we're going to do an argument from contingency. So for those that are not familiar, it's in logic, we have three states. Okay. We have a logical necessity, which is something that is true by necessity. So once you prove a logical necessity, it becomes true by definition. We have a logical possibility, which is something that could possibly be true or possibly be untrue. And we have a logical impossibility, which is something that can never be true or can never accept existence into itself. So, for some examples, a logical possibility is something like me or a unicorn, in the sense that I could have existed, I could have not existed. There's nothing about me that's necessary. Or a unicorn is something that doesn't exist but could potentially exist because there's nothing logically that prevents it from existing. And a logical impossibility, which is something like a squared circle, which is something that can never exist under any possible universe because it's basically a contradiction. It's not a thing. And because by definition, what makes something a square and what makes something a circle is mutually exclusive. So far, so good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So with the argument from contingency, the way we start. Okay, sorry, 1 second. So with the logical, so with the universe being contingent, which it is because the universe is made up of parts and it's arranged in a specific way. Could have been arranged differently, and so anything that is this what we call specified could be different because it requires an external specifier. So, for example, I have green eyes. I could have had black eyes or blue eyes, but something external to myself specified my eyes. In my case, you could say it's either the genes in my cells or the genes that were within my father's sperm or my mother's ovum, or my father and mother's genetic code. And so what made me have this, the height that I have, etc., comes from something external to myself because I'm not creating myself. And so same thing with my parents, same thing with their parents. Even if we go back 10,000 years, even though we don't have any
We get it.
direct
We get it.
evidence
We get it.
of my grandparents, yeah, but I'm just doing the whole thing from the beginning.
Right.
10,000 years, we still know my great, 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 great grandparents exist because I exist and they're logically necessary. And then if you go beyond that, why does creation exist? It's logically necessary for an uncaused first cause to put everything into motion. And so this is the argument from contingency, which logically proves an uncaused first cause, which is what we call a lower God. Now, this uncaused first cause, because it's the first, it must by definition be unspecified. Because for it to be specified, it would require something that precedes it to specify it. And since it's uncaused, by definition, it is uncreated and never ending. So al-qadim and al-baqa. the pre-eternal and the never-ending. Because by the definition of something being necessary is it does not accept non-existence within itself. And so this uncaused first caused, we've established as al-qadim and al-baqa, or pre-eternal, so never uncreated and never ending. It also is unspecified, so any attribute that it has, one, it will only possess necessary attributes. We're talking about essential attributes here, which is the attributes of its essence.
Wait,
If
just one
it,
second. Why is it that your mic is like it's okay, but it's like the volume like jumps up and down? Like, is it like some other mic you're using?
no, I'm just using my cell phone without anything.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll
I
just
can try
check it out.
some headphones if you want. Sometimes if some background noise flares off, maybe the noise suppression. I'm not sure.
Okay. Anyways,
So
continue.
this okay. So this uncaused first cause we established. So it has only necessary attributes as essential attributes, not attributes of action. So those are important differences. So the essential attribute for it to bring creation into existence, it requires power, and because it's unspecified, it has to either have omni properties or not those properties at all. Because let's say instead of it being all powerful, it had a power level of 1,000 or 1,000,000 or whatever. If you had a scale to measure power, it's still, whatever the limitation is, would require something external to it to specify it. And there's nothing that precedes it by definition, and therefore it cannot be specified. And so it is all powerful. Now, this is the philosophical proof for all powerful. First, I'm going to define what all powerful is, because this is something that Christians fall into. All powerful is something that has power over all things, all potential things and actual things, but not non things. So, like squared circles, because it's not a thing. Now, put differently, the universe has a bunch of power and energy within it. That
Wait,
power
hold
of
on.
energy.
But did you define power? You just said it had power over what? But what's the definition of power?
Power is the ability to do things.
It's the
So
ability
either
for
the
work,
ability
like
to,
physical,
so
like
the
the physical
ability,
definition.
yeah, so the ability to create, the ability to destroy, the ability to enact change. This is power.
Okay.
So, and it must have power over all things, like I said. And so this universe contains energy and power and matter and mass. And for this mass and energy and matter to exist, you need something that created it, and that was the all-powerful, uncaused first cause. So we've established now that it has power. And to give you a thought experiment of why it must necessarily have power, is I, in my mind, can imagine building a building or building a planet or a solar system. But I lack the power to do these things. So even if I have the knowledge and the will, I'm not able to bring them into existence. Now. So that's all powerful. Now, beyond power, what we need to be able to create, and since existence exists, it needs the ability to create, we need knowledge. Now, this knowledge, again, because it can only possess omni properties, otherwise, what's limiting its knowledge? It must be all knowing. And so it must have knowledge of all potential things, all possible things, and all impossible things. An absolute knowledge that is uncontingent and unchanging, because a necessary being doesn't change. Because if it accepts change into itself, it is no longer necessary. So now some people will try to argue, like atheists, as a last resort. They will say, well, what if it just creates randomly? Now, this is partially because they don't really understand what random is. So there's two aspects to randomness. One, absolute randomness doesn't exist. I have a background in statistics. And so the way randomness works is it's just if we don't perceive all the various probabilities, we believe something to be random. The second thing is even if we did grant that randomness existed, And so, let's pretend it's an example of rolling a million-sided dice with the various things weighted based on the percentages of their probability on this dice. To roll the dice, you actually require two things. You require probabilities and possibilities, which haven't been created yet. And two, you require time for the dice to roll. And neither of these things exist because they're not created yet.
We understand that the universe is deterministic. Yeah, we get it. We're just trying to save you time.
Not deterministic, created. Right?
Well, the universe is deterministic, correct?
No.
The universe is not deterministic?
It depends. Define what you mean by the universe is deterministic.
Essentially, everything works like billiard balls, right? Everything's determined by what precedes it.
No. There's real choices that happen in the universe.
You talk about free will?
Yes. But I mean, this isn't the main subject of the matter.
Yeah, let's
So yes, free will
let's
exists.
go because like we had a huge conversation in here about, and I think most of us concluded that like free will is incompatible with predetermination or fate or whatever.
No,
But I
that's
don't
not
want to
true.
get into that. I don't want to get into
Okay,
that.
we can
I
skip
will
that,
just
but that's not the case.
note that like I don't agree with that. It doesn't make any sort of like logical sense to me. But please move on. Let's not go down a tangent here.
Okay, sure, but that's not correct. But yeah, we'll leave it.
That's your opinion. Okay. Anyways, let's
A
move on.
fact. Like we have
That's what you believe to be a fact. Let's move on.
Yeah, sure, and we have mountains of scholarship pertaining to this fact. But we can get to that later. Let's stay with the fundamentals because we're not talking about predeterminism at all yet. But we have probabilities, and so for something to create a universe, it has to have a knowledge of how to create. Otherwise, it can't just create. Pretty simple, straightforward. And in order for this thing to create, so it needs knowledge and power. But it's not just knowledge and power that it requires, it also requires a will. And a will is just the ability to choose what one or many things out of the options presented. And again, because this uncaused first cause only possesses necessary attributes and any attribute it possesses is unrestricted, it has an absolute free will, not bound by anything or limited by anything. Because, there's this universe could have had any assortment of planets, but it had a specific amount, and that creator chose to enact it in that way. And so once we get to an explanatory thing of why things are the way they are, if we get to the principle of sufficient reason, which is the uncaused first cause's will or power or knowledge, we stop there because everything's been proven. There's no questioning the will. You can try to understand the will, but once you reach the will, that's the solution to the answer. So now we've established an uncaused first cause that's all-knowing, all-powerful, with an absolute free will, uncreated, never-ending, doesn't accept non-existence or death into itself, self-sustaining, because for it to be uncreated and never-ending, it doesn't need any creation. And also, because it's all-knowing, then it is all-seeing and all-hearing, and the sight and the hearing are derivative of the knowledge. And so now we
Okay.
just
Can I just again, I feel like we're gonna go down a tangent here, but you are establishing like a lot of attributes that I don't feel like are that well justified.
which one's not justified?
For example, the free will and the intentionality.
Of course it is. Okay, so let's take away the will. We don't have probabilities yet. Why does something happen in a specific way rather than another way?
Because it's just deterministic. What do you mean?
Okay, what's determining?
The previous state.
No, there was no previous state. It is the first state. So what is determining?
Well, you could imagine that you might have, like, a rule, right? So, like, what might be, like, the non-contingent, object might be something that just has a rule that will propagate into, like, a certain form no
There's no
matter
rules
what.
yet. The laws of physics are not
No,
necessary.
I'm saying it's ontologically a rule,
It's not though.
but why not?
How is it a rule? Okay, how is it a rule? So like let's say because you're saying things just happen kind of on autopilot. So the laws of physics are not necessary to be in the state that they are. The speed of light doesn't need to be what it is. The force of gravity in this universe doesn't need to be what it is. You know, proportions and equations could have been slightly different. They're not necessary. So we don't even have laws of physics or time yet. So how are things being predetermined if there's nothing to determine them? You have God and nothing else. No laws of
Um,
physics, so things can't happen in autopilot.
yeah, but, like, even if you don't have the laws of physics, are you saying well, see, I mean, this goes into, like, a deeper issue, right? Because I say that, like, we understand even our logic comes from the physical world. Like, it's
No,
derived from the physical. That's what I believe.
our
Like,
logic, the laws of logic aren't dependent on the physical
where do
world.
you get the where do you get the idea of something like the law of identity?
What do you mean? That would be across all possible universes. Even there's not a theoretical universe that can exist where the law of identity doesn't hold. The laws of
Yeah, but what I'm
identity, non-contradiction, and exclusive admit hold in every possible universe. And
but
I
what
can
I'm
even give
saying
you a demonstration of why it would never not hold. You want me to show you the proof that it can never not hold?
wait, I was about to make a point.
Go ahead.
So the reason why it doesn't make sense, first of all, we have limited brains, right? We have limited brains that can only imagine things yeah, with a limit, right? But this stuff has to do with how it is that the universe behaves. Because this
No,
type of stuff, actually, there's something called like quantum logic. I don't know if you ever heard about it, where these like ideas of like basic logic that we usually go with are kind of like out of the window. So
that's on the basics of.
my point is when we have something basic like the law of identity, I think it's derived from the physical world.
No,
It's behavior we see in the world. Okay, so let's do a thought
I can
experiment, right?
demonstrate why. I can demonstrate why that's not the case.
Just
So
one
just
second.
specifically. Okay, go
Just
ahead.
one second. If we imagine some abstract world where you have your mental faculties, right? But you have not had an experience with anything. It's just a black room for whatever purposes, right? It's a black room. How would you be able to derive ideas about, like, say, the law of identity or anything at all?
So this thought experiment doesn't follow because just because you're not able to uncover a logical truth doesn't mean that the logical truth doesn't exist and still hold. So in any possible universe over a two-dimensional shape, the sum of the angles of the triangle will equal 180 degrees. There's no possible two-dimensional sphere or plane where you draw this and this is not the case.
Yeah, but
This holds
you
regardless
understand.
of 1 second. Yeah, but I'm telling you. So just because you would not discover a law of the universe doesn't mean the law of the universe doesn't exist and doesn't hold. It was just undiscovered. Just like if somebody didn't discover propositional logic, that doesn't mean that propositional logic wasn't there to be discovered. Or if
Yeah,
you
but
know,
what I'm okay, sorry.
so if you were created without an ability to reason whatsoever, like let's say the universe didn't have mankind, didn't even have monkeys or dogs, just had plants and very simple creatures like jellyfish, that would have no bearing on whether the law of identity would hold in that universe. Just because something does not perceive the law of identity doesn't mean the law of identity doesn't exist. Just like as humans, we didn't know how to perceive radio waves and microwaves, doesn't mean they didn't exist. We just were not familiar with them. And so, yes, you need some experience to be able to deduce things, but the conclusions of the deduction would hold regardless of whether you have these experiences or not.
But see, this is what you just said. You just said you need experience to deduce things, right?
Yeah,
Now, the thought experiment I gave you is of a place that doesn't have there's no physics there, right? It's just quote unquote a dark room. There's no experience. There's no nothing
yeah. So
because
there's no
that's
experience. It doesn't change. So again, like if God created a world with no life, just rocks and trees. I mean, just rocks and wind and rain. Or like we could just look at the surface of the sun. On the surface of the sun, there is nothing that perceives the law of identity. But the law of identity still holds on the surface of the sun. Or I'll word it to you differently. I can do a thought experiment to prove to you that the three basic laws of logic would hold across every potential universe. So let's look at two universes. One universe where the laws of logic and identity and non-contradiction hold, and one universe where they do not. Okay? So in our universe, the universe where the laws of logic and identity and non-contradiction don't hold, because the law of identity in that universe doesn't hold, that means that universe existing and not existing is the same thing. And therefore that universe doesn't exist. Now, from the second universe's perspective, since existing and not existing is the same thing, that universe also doesn't exist in that universe. And
but
so that
think about
universe
the word
cannot
you're
exist
using.
in all, yes, so that universe cannot exist in all possible universes.
But think about the word you're using here. You're using words that are derived from our experiences of the real world, right? For example, when you're saying existing, we agreed last time we talked that if I conjure something up in my mind, it doesn't exist, right? For example, if I conjure up a what was it? Uh, like a magical horse,
Unified.
whatever, right? It doesn't
Unified.
actually exist. So you're using words
Yeah.
that are necessarily rooted in the real world, the physical world.
No. So when we're
No?
discussing something having an actual extramental existence, yes, and it doesn't have to be physical, because there are extramental things that exist that are not physical. However, we're not talking about this being a requirement. So again, like for example, the concept of a triangle is not a physical existence. It's a mental process. You can mentally construe a triangle. You know, you might have a different universe where you name it something else, but the name is not relevant. The concept is what's relevant. So whether or not a triangle ever existed doesn't change the fact that the laws that govern the shape of a triangle would still exist.
I understand what you're saying, but what I'm saying is like I don't think that you're thinking about the fact that the idea of a triangle is rooted in you're basically reflecting upon you're abstracting something from the physical world.
Not yeah. So we that's how we came to know it, but it still existed as a concept whether we knew it or not.
Yeah, but
So in
now
any
but
possible
see, but this is but what but when sure, we're talking about us, right? Like the universe it existed before us, fine. But that's not pertinent to this concept you're talking about, which is let's just call it God for whatever reason, right? We'll just call it God, right? The non-contingent, right? Like it doesn't make sense at that point because
no,
you're deriving things that ordinarily make sense if you have an underlying physical universe and there's some experience there, right? But you're
no,
sort of saying like we have this non-contingent thing, and therefore it needs to have free will, and therefore it needs to have ears and eyes inside. No, these are like
no,
things we derive from the
nobody
from
said
the real
anything
world.
about ears or eyes. It cannot have ears or
Didn't you do
eyes.
that
It cannot
earlier
be.
with knowledge?
No, I said all seeing and all hearing. I didn't say anything about ears or eyes. God objectively cannot be a body because all bodies are contingent. All bodies are specified,
But
and
what does it
therefore the
mean to be
creator
all
cannot.
hearing and all seeing?
Yeah, through the knowledge.
But wait, when I hear and I see something, okay, so
You're a
this is the
creative
issue.
thing.
Yeah, but when I hear and I see something, when I hear something, it's due to it's due to sound waves. It's
Yeah, yeah,
intrinsically physical.
yeah, yeah. That's you because you're a physical being. God being a not physical. You see in space and time. God doesn't is not bound by space and time, so doesn't require either to see or to hear.
But then what does it mean to see or hear then? Because like it
I
has
already
to mean
explained this.
something else, right?
Yeah, so the definition of to see is to know what something appears to be. The opposite of to see, because again, it only has omni property. So when it comes to vision, it's an all seeing or no seeing, and no seeing would be blind, and being blind and having no concept of vision would mean that it's deficient in its knowledge, which means it's not all knowing.
I don't think that's true.
It is.
I don't
You
think
can
that's
try to
true
demonstrate. You can demonstrate why you think that it's not true. I don't see how it's possible that you're going to demonstrate it, though.
because you can imagine a translation. Like, you can imagine an
What
isomorphic model of the world, right? That wouldn't mean that you would be deficient in your knowledge.
you still would, yes. So if you're
No,
all
I don't
knowing,
think
you
that's
have
true.
to know. If you're all knowing, you have to have knowledge of all things,
Yeah,
right?
I get the knowledge thing. I get the knowledge
Okay.
thing, but it's like
So does
you're
does
1 second. 1
does
second. Just 1
does
second.
what things
1
look
second.
like fall on?
1
Wait. Does
second.
what things look? No, no. Does what things look like fall under knowledge?
Does what things look like fall under knowledge?
Yes,
I think it falls under perception.
it falls under knowledge as well. If I
I
ask you, yes, I'll give you an example. If I ask you, do you know what a dragon is? If you don't have any concept of a dragon, would you say yes or no?
I would say I would know about it in
So you wouldn't
additional
have the
modality.
knowledge of a dragon. Yeah, so you wouldn't
No,
have the knowledge of a dragon.
I don't think that's true. I'll give you an example, okay? Let's say you have a person who is colorblind, okay?
Mhm.
And they look at a dragon, and I look at a dragon, okay? But our perception of this dragon is different.
So what?
Would you
They
say
would
this
have a
person that
deficient. They would have a deficient perception of a dragon. Yes, and so the question for them would be different. It's which is, do you know what colors look like?
yeah, but who's to say that your perception is the correct perception of, like, how things
It's
are in
it's
and of
it's
themselves?
it's a more complete perception than a
How do
colorblind
you
person's
Okay,
perception.
let's say somebody has an inverted chroma, right? Have you ever heard about,
Doesn't
have
change
you ever
anything. So they
ha
see
have you
they perceive colors backwards or wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so they're not perceiving things correctly, right?
No, no, I'm not saying that because nobody here can establish what is the correct thing, right? That's why,
I mean, by definition, by the name of their chroma, it being inverted would illustrate that it's a deficient
well,
chroma. Because there are illnesses
I
that
mean
make
inverted.
sweet things taste bitter. But even,
I understand.
let's grant it.
Wait, no,
So, so
just
the,
1 second. Let me just clarify. When I say inverted, I'm saying inverted relative to us, right? I'm not saying that
yeah,
our
I
perception
know.
is the objective perception.
Oh,
That's not what I'm
I'll give you one better. There's many animal species that can see a much wider range of the color spectrum than we can. And so
Yeah,
their
okay.
vision is better than our vision. Or there's, eagles can see much further than we can, so their vision is superior to our vision. And so their knowledge of what's happening beyond the horizon is much better than what our knowledge is when it comes to perceived knowledge strictly from what you can see. And so again, but all created beings' knowledge is limited for the most part by time. The creator is not. And so this is a deficiency in our vision. But if someone is blind, for example, they're not capable of having a complete knowledge of most things because they cannot perceive what things look like. Now, something with more senses than us, for example, dogs can smell and determine things from scent that humans cannot. And so they would have some better senses than us. And so our sense of, perception in certain ways would be deficient comparing to some animals. But that doesn't change the point. Is not having a concept of knowledge would be a deficiency. Having no concept of knowledge is having the concept of blindness, and that's a deficiency. And so you can't be all knowing and not have knowledge of what things look like.
Um, so the way that I use the word knowing here, and again, I understand this stuff becomes very difficult, and like oftentimes you reach sort of like an impasse or whatever because we use these words like in some ways ordinarily, and then when we're being philosophical, we want to be really precise about this stuff, right? I don't consider this stuff to be a point about knowledge. I consider it to be a point about perception. Okay,
Yeah, that's what
I
you consider.
consider yeah, I
That's
consider
not correct.
okay, but can you that's what I think, okay? Like, whether I'm correct or not, whatever, okay? Um, I see information as it being encoded, and I think information holds knowledge. Just because you don't perceive something in a certain way that another person is perceiving it, I don't think that's a deficiency in knowledge because nobody can really establish what is objective out there, right? As you just said earlier, some animals perceive some things like in another way, right? And that's not necessarily the way that the thing is in and of itself, like objectively. Like if you could imagine that we have some kind of like a detector that can detect objectively how this thing is in and of itself. As I said earlier, with the example of like an inverted chroma, I'm not saying that us who have the quote unquote the regular chroma perceives this dragon in an objective fashion. That's not what I'm claiming here. I'm just saying it's inverted relative to us. So who is to say that this object that the way we perceive this object is the correct way or the right way or the way of somebody who does not have deficient knowledge? I just see that
Okay,
as
so
being perception.
okay, so again, with inverted chroma, so under the guise of all knowing, the all knowing would know what the dragon looks like for someone with normal vision and the person with inverted vision, and what it would look like to a crab, which has a larger color spectrum that it can see, or any other species. So this doesn't change anything. Again, to have all knowing, you have knowledge of all things, real and potential, and impossible. And so it's an all encompassing knowledge. And since it's an all encompassing knowledge, it would include what things look like and what things sound like. And again, our knowledge, for example, our vision is deficient because it requires light, line of sight, and we can only really see things within time. Whereas the all seeing does not require light to see, does not require a direct line of vision, does not require light, and does not require time. Because again, the seeing is derivative of the knowledge. Same thing for
I'm
the hearing.
sorry. I think the issue is here
Can you be
that
all knowing and blind? Just a quick question. Can you be all knowing and blind?
I think you can, yeah.
No, you can't. You're objectively wrong. You
Maybe
wouldn't even have
maybe
you have knowledge of
maybe
colors without knowing what colors are?
well, you can have the knowledge of them, yeah.
No, you can't. How would you have the knowledge? So do blind people have any concept of colors?
It's not about yes, they have they have a concept
No,
of
they
you
don't.
you can
Not really.
translate it, right? You don't think you
No,
can
no, not
translate it?
really. No, how would you explain it to how would you explain to a person who's born blind
How does a
what
computer
blue is?
how does a computer detect that something is red and something is blue?
They have codes. They don't see any of it though. They don't
They
have the
have
proper
what?
concept of vision. It's code. They don't see it and
Yeah, but
experience
that's
it.
what I'm see,
And a
this is what I'm
blind
getting at.
person. Okay, so
This is
no,
what
no.
I'm
Well,
getting at.
let's stick to
Wait,
this.
wait, wait, wait,
When
let me
you
just
tell a
explain.
blind, wait. When you tell, explain the concept of green to a blind person in a way that they will have a correct image of what green is.
I think
Doesn't exist.
yeah, but see, this is the thing, right? The green person is handicapped. What I'm saying is it's not about the color itself. The green person is handicapped.
This
What I'm saying is you can have this is what I think, right? You can have a lack of perception in something, but as long as there's a way to translate the information into some form of an encoding, I think you can still have knowledge of it. Okay?
not no again because you can't even if you
Then how
understand that green, even if you understand that green is darker than red, which are both are darker than white. You don't have a concept of lighter or darker, and so those words don't mean anything to you. And again, you keep missing the very important point because I don't understand why you're doubling down on this spot. Because again, all knowing means no deficiency whatsoever in knowledge. So there's no aspect of knowledge that is unknown, not just your actions and your thoughts and what you talk. God doesn't even need you to create sound waves for him to hear what you're thinking or hear what you're feeling. And so again, it's a more perfect hearing and seeing because God can see what's in your hearts. He can hear what's in your heart. But that's not
that just
something
seems
that
like a cop
requires
out.
a sound. Yeah, but that's not something that requires a sound. So saying if something is blind, because again, it only possesses omni property, so it's all or nothing, and blindness is a deficiency that is incompatible with all knowing. Like you saying there's a way to work around so you could understand vision means if you could perfectly replicate vision, then you have a concept of vision. You know, if something could see without eyeballs,
I'm not
they
talking
had
about
some
the vision
telepathic
itself.
ability.
That's I'm
You
talking about. No, listen to
you
me.
can't have perfect knowledge if you're having a deficient, if you're missing an aspect of that knowledge. It's that simple.
But see, this is the problem. You're using the word knowledge for it. I call it perception.
It's
Okay.
knowledge still.
I don't. So let me ask you something. Okay. If you see, I don't know. Let's say you have an animal, right, and an animal sees something. Okay.
But we don't need
Eh,
to. Do you know what I look like?
No, I don't know what you look like.
Okay, you have a deficiency in your knowledge of the appearance of me. Yeah,
Yeah,
an
but
all-knowing thing would know everything about me. Not just what I look like, not just what I sound like, not what my name is, not what every cell in my
you're
body is up to.
misunderstanding what is it I'm saying. You're really
No, but I'm
misunderstanding me.
telling you, no, but you're playing with words. So I just like established to you that you not knowing what I look like, even though you have perfectly fine perception, so you not having physically seen me or seen any representation of me, resulted in a deficiency of your knowledge, because again, your knowledge is contingent of what I look like or what I am or what I'm
That's
doing.
okay. You need to hear me out now,
Yeah.
please. Please don't interrupt
No,
me.
no, but can you deny that you don't know what I look like?
I don't know what you look like, but I
Okay,
think
so
you're
do you see how
conflating two.
perception ties to knowledge?
No, I don't. I think you're conflating two
You,
things, and
so
you
how
might
would
be
you get? Okay,
misunderstanding.
so, well, let's
Wait,
explain.
hold
How
on one
would you
second. Let
get
me just
knowledge? Wait,
talk.
wait.
Let me just
How
talk.
would you? No, bro,
Wait,
bro.
wait,
This
no,
is
no,
this
no.
is a
Stop,
long.
stop,
Wait,
stop,
wait.
stop, stop. You're
How
being way
would
too
you know
interruptive.
what? No, no. Wait, wait.
Stop. You're
Just real
being
quick.
way too
How
interruptive.
how
Stop.
no, no,
Stop.
no, no.
Stop.
How would you?
Stop.
How would you know?
You're
How
being
would
way
you know
too
what I look?
interruptive.
Just
I
answer
want
the
to make a
question
point, and you're
because you're
being way
wasting.
too interruptive.
How would you
Stop
know
it.
what I look
No.
like? Just answer the
Stop.
question. How
Stop
would you
it.
know what I look like?
Stop it.
I'm gonna keep
Stop it.
repeating the question. How would you know what I look like?
Okay.
What's
Okay.
the only way for you to acquire this
Then
knowledge?
I'm out. Listen, you
No,
need
no.
to.
What's the only?
You're
No, bro.
having a
Just answer the
misunderstanding
question.
of what is it I'm saying to
No,
you.
yeah. How would you know? No, I know what you're misunderstanding. So I'm showing you the shortcut
No,
to
you
your problem. How
misunderstand
would you
my
know what?
point. I'm
Okay,
not
how would
saying
you
I'm
acquire
right
the
here. I'm just
knowledge of
saying you're
what I look like?
misunderstanding my point.
Okay, how would you acquire the knowledge of what I look
Is
like?
this what you do?
I'm just asking you.
I was
How
being
would you
respectful to you.
acquire?
Wait, hold
I
on.
am. So answer the
No, you're
question. How would
not
you
being
acquire
respectful.
the
You're
knowledge?
you're
No, you're
interrupting a
going off
lot.
topic. You're
You're
going
not
off
being
topic.
respectful.
If you
But
could
you're not
answer
being
this question,
respectful. But you're not being
so just
respectful.
answer the question and we'll continue with your
But you're
off-topic
not
thing.
being respectful. This is not an
No, no, you're not
interrogation.
being respectful by derailing the conversation. So I want you to
How
answer a
wait,
simple
wait,
question.
I'm not, like, intentionally
How
derailing the conversation,
Okay, so
okay?
I'm giving you the shortcut. How
I
would you
have
have
an wait, listen to me. I have an
just answer
objection.
the question, bro? I'm not continuing the conversation until you
Okay,
answer
then
this
get out
question.
of here. Get out of here then. Get out of here. Get out of here. No, get
How
out of
would
here.
you
If you
get
don't wanna have a
how would
conversation,
you how would you get
if you
the
don't want
knowledge
to
of
have a
what I like?
conversation, then get out of
Because
here.
you
You're
know
being
your whole
disrespectful.
argument collapses on
You're
this
being
question.
disrespectful.
How, so answer the
You're being
question and continue what
disrespectful.
you want. Answer the
You
question
are
and continue what
being
you want.
disrespectful. No, you're
Answer
not
the
gonna do
question.
this. This is
Okay,
not an
I will answer
interrogation.
the question for
I've
you.
been patient with
The
you.
way
I've
you
been
would
patient with
acquire
you, and you're
the way
showing
you
very
would
bad manners. You're
I'm not
showing
showing
very
bad
bad
manners.
manners.
You're being
Yes, you
disingenuous.
are. You
Bro,
could
like
claim
I
that I'm
will
being
answer the
disingenuous all day, and I
yeah.
could
So
just go yeah, but
I will
listen,
answer
listen,
my own
I can
question.
just do the
I
same
will
thing, right?
answer.
If you want
Okay,
I
I'm
can
gonna
just
answer
say
my own.
that
I'm gonna answer
you're
my
being
own question.
no,
I'm gonna answer
listen.
my own question.
Atallah, can you
You
please
would
mute him?
gain knowledge
Can you
of what
please
I
mute him?
look like by perceiving me
Atallah,
or a likeness of me.
listen,
And so the only way to get that
you're
knowledge
being
is
disrespectful.
through
Why are you doing this?
perception.
Why are you
Bro, I
doing
just
this?
pointed out.
Okay,
So
Sam,
to
you're
You're
dominating the mic quite
huh?
powerfully. So let Bobby talk. Go on, Bobby.
So let him answer the question then.
no, listen, I've been
No, it's
very
very
patient
simple.
with
Just
you.
answer
I've
the
been
question. How would you
I've
get the
been very
knowledge of what I look like? No, but this,
Almost
look,
please, like,
almost.
honestly, like, one
This
more
is
time and just,
super off
like,
topic.
honestly, just mute him. Just mute him, because
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
being
So just
disrespectful.
answer the question for
He's
answer
being
the.
disrespectful. Yeah, thank you.
Go on, Bobby.
And he
Talk.
left. There you go. What the guy didn't understand the Hummus, were you following the conversation?
No, I'm at work.